My dear brothers in the risen Christ, the Mother Church celebrates on January 31st St. John Bosco, founder 1815 to 1888. St. John Bosco was a social saint. He was not interested in inquiring into the causes of poverty, but rather responded to the immediate needs of the destitute people. He once said, "We have denunciations and political actions to other more educated religious orders as we go straight to the poor." St. John Bosco was an unwearied worker, and rest was a stranger to him. But his ceaseless activity took a toll on his physical health in 1854 when he suffered a hemorrhage. When the doctors departed of his life, his boys organized themselves into a small prayer groups, and by fasting and fervent prayers stormed heavens to restore their beloved father to health. St. John Bosco providentially survived the fatal hemorrhage. A few weeks later, a cholera epidemic ravaged the city of Turin, and around 500 people died. The general public, fearing the deadly epidemic, refused to help the sick and the dead. St. John Bosco asked his boys to prepare themselves for this dangerous task. He said to them that as long as they trusted the Lord and refrained from committing mortal sins, they would not be infected by the deadly disease even if they handled the sick and the dead people. He organized the boys into small groups and asked some groups to take the sick people to the hospital and some other groups to carry the dead body to the mortuaries. He strictly ordered the boys to wash their hands in vinegar after handling every sick patient or the dead bodies. By the time of epidemic receded, the death toll was 1,400 people. But providentially, not one of his boys was infected by the deadly epidemic. First, St. John Bosco's life. John Bosco, who was more popularly known as Don Bosco, was born at Piedmont in Italy in the year 1815. The period in which he lived and worked was the most turbulent one, both spiritually and politically. The period has seen the birth and activities of the men like Karl Marx, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Newman, Bismarck, and Garibaldi. John Bosco lost his father when he was only 6 years old, but had a wonderful, hard-working, and devout mother who was a true guide for him on the road to sanctity. As soon as she came to know that her little son John had an inclination of becoming a priest, she prepared him assiduously in the noble tradition of Christianity. Second, St. John Bosco as a priest. John Bosco was a brilliant student. By the age of 26 in 1841, when he was ordained a priest, He was a man of wide knowledge and profound culture. Besides knowing his mother tongue Italian, he was fluent in French. He also knew Latin, Greek, Hebrew, and a bit of German. He was the author of many books. By the age of 40, he was the author of A History of the Church, a manual of religious instruction for young people, A History of Italy, and many other books. He found his vocations not as a scholar but as a religious social worker. Don Bosco, as a priest, discerned the true path of his priesthood in the service of the destitute. When, as a poor priest of Turin, he had come across many body wandering about the city, often in search of food and shelter, for rest and sleep, he was moved with compassion for them. He was shocked to find young boys languishing in the prisons for more than 12 years for petty thefts. He decided to do something for those unfortunate youngsters. With the permission of the Archbishop, he began to form those wandering boys into youth clubs. His first task was to give those destitute boys a house to stay, and thus the first Bosco home came into existence. He began his home in a shed and divided the shed into a common room for the boys and a chapel. His mother joined him, and she looked after him and kept the place in order. Thus, the first oratory of St. Francis de Sales was born. He called it the Oratory in remembrance of St. Philip Neri, a saint of the Roman Emperor in the 16th century, and St. Francis de Sales in memory of that great saintly Bishop of Geneva. The people of Turin call the members of this oratory Salesians. Saint Don Bosco met with many difficulties and oppositions, but he was able to overcome all those problems by his patience and smiling. He got along well even with the most anti-clerical government officials. The king sent 300 lire for Don Bosco's little boys. The free-thinking and anti-clerical Prime Minister Retassi himself helped Don Bosco to draft the constitution in such a way as to evade the anti-clerical laws of the government. St. Don Bosco, by his ceaseless activity, was multiplying the destitute homes and institutions not only in Italy but also in Europe. His dream of founding a congregation for the destitute was materialized with the definitive approval of his constitution in 1874. The Salesian congregation spread quickly across the world, and at the time of his death there was 900 members in the congregation in about 200 houses. A female branch was known as Helpers of Mary was started to carry on the education task among girls. The declared aim of the Salesians was to devote themselves to the poorest of the poor and the destitute young boys and girls according to the spirit of their founder Don Bosco. St. Don Bosco had also his share of mystical experience like St. Thomas Aquinas. In one of his mystical experiences, the Lord asked him, "What do you desire of me?" Don Bosco answered, "Lord, give me souls and keep the rest." May God bless you all. Amen.